Kia ora and welcome to this Rugby League Funkadelic version of the Nichecast. I am the Diggity Doodah Doc, and a little bit of a new initiative this week, starting this week I should say, as I'm going to endeavour to drop a Rugby League specific podcast, a version of the Nichecast, just me talking my shit about Rugby League every week around Monday, Tuesday, hopefully early in the week, to just talk through Rugby League topics. Usually going to record it before Teamless Tuesday, so just keep that in mind. And I will, as always with anything from the Niche Cache, have a huge Kiwi NRL focus with all the players who are either eligible for the Kiwis or born in Aotearoa, played their junior footy in Aotearoa. That's how I kind of judge Kiwi NRL footy. And of course, as I am the writer of the Diary of an Aotearoa Warriors fan, I will be splitting these episodes into segments based on like the Aotearoa Warriors at the start, and then I'll move into a broader conversation offering a few thoughts and ideas on the NRL as a whole. If you're listening to this, you're probably a regular listener of the Nichecast, so welcome to these Rugby League specific episodes. Otherwise, I will be we do have other episodes, a range of Kiwi sports as well, so check those out. And you know the deal, if you love the Niche Cache, if you enjoy what we're doing, the best way to support us is on Patreon. So hit up those links and support us on Patreon. It's a great way to support independent media as we try and grow and expand. And yeah, just that's the best way to support us. And if you've got any other ways to support us, those are more than welcome as well. So let's start with the Aotearoa Warriors, who are in a very interesting, well, not interesting, like it's just a weird position at the moment, because as someone who is deeply ingrained into thinking and reporting and just absorbing Aotearoa Warriors stuff, I don't really know how to describe how I feel. So basic update, we're coming after the Anzac Day loss to the Melbourne Storm, 1 point loss, and it was a game which reminded me a whole lot about the Rabbitohs game, in which there was adversity for the Warriors, but very like basement level. They showed up with a fantastic attitude, and they made it a competitive game based upon that attitude, that desire. There wasn't so much defensive nous against the Rabbitohs because they leaked a whole lot of points, but against the Storm you saw a fantastic defensive effort from the Warriors, and that was crucial in restricting the Storm to just 13 points. The thing that held the Warriors back from winning that game, and what handed the game to the Melbourne Storm, was the same thing that handed the game to the South Sydney Rabbitohs, and the fact that you're playing with a spine that doesn't really understand how to control a game. You got Chanel Harris-Tavita basically playing the dominant hand, the controlling figure in both of those games. And yeah, we can look at Isaac Luke, we can look at Roger Tuivasa-Sheck in the case of the Rabbitohs game, but in both instances, Chanel Harris-Tavita struggled to close the game out. Like, I think he had a poor kick leading up to the Melbourne Storm's penalty to get back into that game against the Melbourne Storm on Anzac Day. So you can complain about the penalty, you can complain about this or that with regards to the Melbourne Storm game, but the Warriors didn't close it out. It never really felt like they were going to win that game. It always felt like the Melbourne Storm were in with a sniff of coming back, but the Warriors didn't close it out, and that's completely to be expected. Like, Chanel Harris-Tavita is very early on in his career, and he's learning these lessons. So on that note, it's a great few weeks for Chanel Harris-Tavita. Like, it's a very tough few weeks for a young half, and a tough few weeks for the Warriors, considering I think they've lost a couple of games that they could have won, and that in the big scheme of things, 2 points. Well, in the big scheme of things, I don't think it matters a whole deal, to be honest, but I'll get onto it in a jiffy. But in terms of getting 2 points and, you know, staying alive in the top 8, I think the Warriors are 10th at the moment. They are 12th, actually. And so in terms of getting 2 points and winning games, it's tough. And it's tough on Chanel Harris-Tavita, but he's learning and he is understanding what it's like to play at this level week in, week out. And of course, against Melbourne Storm, losing by 1 point, whole lot of changes, no Blake Green again. So we've got this Warriors team that is losing games, struggling, and then you've got on top of that, to make things weird, you've got the fact that Blake Green hasn't been playing recently. We haven't really settled on a hooking rotation. Isaac Luke is, I think that game against the Storm was Isaac Luke coming back to his best, but then you had Nathaniel Roach kind of playing out of position. We're just getting used to having Nathaniel Roach, Jazz Tavanga and Isaac Luke all in the same team, which is a funky move from Stephen Kearney. Not one that is easily done though. I love it because it's funky. I love it because it's weird and different, and it suits the Warriors playing style of being fast and lots of footwork, but we've got to figure out how it's going to work, and that's going to take time as well. We didn't have Roger Tuivasa-Sheck against the Storm, so the Warriors lost by 1 point to the Storm without Roger Tuivasa-Sheck and Blake Green, and that's pretty cool. But there's this very negative feeling around the Warriors in the sense that they're just struggling. They're struggling. I like the effort against the Storm. There was a lot of adversity. The team rallied defensively, and I've been confused by Stephen Kearney's coaching decisions, selection decisions, and how the team's playing, because up to this game the defense wasn't there. We saw great signs defensively last season, but those defensive signs weren't there in the weeks leading up to this Melbourne Storm and then suddenly Stephen Kearney gets this team firing on all cylinders defensively, and they can do a good job defensively when they want to. It's just getting that done. Of course, against the Melbourne Storm, we had Patrick Herbert making his debut, and I think Hayes Perham also came off the bench to play a couple of minutes as well, but the big one was Patrick Herbert coming on at centre. And you had Solomon Ikata playing reserve grade, so there was an injury cloud around Solomon Ikata to start with. Then we had compassionate grounds as the reason for him not playing against the Storm, and then he did end up playing against the Bulldogs in reserve grade. The Warriors lost to the Bulldogs in reserve grade 22 points to 16, which is... the Warriors reserve grade team does have a habit of losing games at the moment, but it's more individual based, like what are the players doing. And so just on that, it is feasible that Solomon Ikata, his injury or the compassionate grounds, whatever it was, kept him out of Anzac Day, and then he could play on the Saturday, like maybe having another day of rest and relaxation, had him fit and healthy, because he wasn't initially listed in the reserve grade team. He was playing as number 22, so he was a late inclusion. So it's it's feasible that there is no shenanigans here, that it's purely injury or compassionate ground based. But he did end up playing reserve grade, and yeah, it's a weird one. I won't go balls deep into the reserve grade stats, because that's getting into the bit of the weeds about the Warriors, but he wasn't too bad. He averaged over 10 metres per run with 130 metres, 13 runs, but everyone missed a whole lot of tackles. So Solomon Ikata missed 5 tackles, Tane Mill missed 4 tackles, Adam Kieran missed 4 tackles, so it's hard to really highlight Solomon Ikata's stats when they are kind of on par with the rest of the reserve grade team. So then you've got the whole Solomon Ikata situation. Like, Solomon Ikata may not get back into this Warriors starting top 17, because Patrick Herbert was really good against the Storm. And then you've got this weird situation where everyone was hating on Stephen Kearney for his selection mind games, like with Roger Tuivasa-Sheck was fit and healthy. You had Solomon Ikata being questionable via injury and then not playing via compassionate grounds, and who cares? Of course, all the mainstream media care, because that's how they get their information, and they're like super by the book, and whatever the coach says, that's going to be what we report, and all that just bullshit. Like, it doesn't matter. Coaches lie, players lie, everyone in the NRL lies, and it's gamesmanship. Like, Stephen Kearney's coming up against Craig Bellamy, and I'm fairly sure Stephen Kearney, as a student of Craig Bellamy, he's going to try and, have a couple of tricks. he's going to play some shenanigans. And it's not shenanigans with the media, it's shenanigans with Craig Bellamy. Because how does Craig Bellamy get any information? Through any media reports. So, but point being, if you're trusting what coaches and players are saying, you're a fool. Coaches lie, clubs lie, as may be seen in this Cody Nikorima situation, which I'll touch on as well. There's so many layers to talking about the Warriors at the moment, it's kind of crazy. So how do I feel about the Warriors? I still feel that the Warriors are a team that's capable of making the top 8 and perhaps doing even better than that. But we got to be 100% honest here and say that the Warriors have been ravaged by injuries to key players. And so it's hard to make any judgment about what the Warriors are doing at the moment when they've played multiple games without Blake Green. When Isaac Luke was in and out, he was under some sort of injury situation to start the season. So we haven't seen a best 17 for the Warriors at the moment. So it's very difficult to make those judgments. And now we've got this Patrick Herbert situation with Solomone Kata. I still think there's going to be changes to the forward pack as well, because you've got guys like Lingy Sao and Chris Sate who don't get a look in the NRL, but I think they might play their way into the NRL team if they can get on the good books of Stephen Kearney. So I'm really trying my best to reserve judgment on the Warriors at the moment, which is, I find it, it's kind of easy to do for me personally, but when everyone around is talking about concrete feelings, concrete emotions and judgments and what the Warriors are up to, obviously with a huge negative twist at the moment, I don't know, I haven't seen the Warriors' best 17 play a game of rugby league yet. So as long as they can stay around the top 8 and then hopefully get in favour of the footy gods and get healthy and get a couple of things going their way. Obviously we're approaching State of Origin period as well, which could be interesting. Things can change very quickly, and I think as we come into the middle stanza of the NRL season, we may see more of a levelling out for the Warriors, where they can be a bit more healthy, they can settle into their structures, and then on top of that have players just have a more settled team. And by settled I mean by the players who really want to be in the top 17 being in the top 17, because that's the vibe I got from Patrick Herbert. He's hungry Herbert. He's ready to play NRL. He wants to play NRL. He wants his opportunity. He's been on the fringes of the Dragons for a couple of years. This is a 2-time junior Kiwis player. This is a dude who has all the talent to be a regular, consistent NRL player, and he hasn't got his opportunity, and then he gets his opportunity, he's hungry, he's ready. Whereas, I don't want to hate on Solomone Kata, but he is someone who represents how the Warriors used to develop players in terms of taking them from under 20s, chucking them in the NRL, and then just leaving them and thinking they're all good. Whereas Patrick Herbert, like a lot of these other recruits that the Warriors have signed, has had to earn his way into the NRL. Like you think of Leeson Armel. Leeson Armel had to battle away for a number of years just to get to that point with the Dragons where he was a consistent NRL selection. Blake Green's a journeyman. He had to battle hard. Lachlan Burr, they signed him and he's just hungry for an opportunity. And I think Patrick Herbert has that desire to keep Solomone Kata out of the top 17. Then we're looking at a very different Warriors team, because it used to just be stock standard Solomone Kata's there each and every week. So I'm very eager to wait for these Teamless Tuesday selections from Stephen Kearney and see what happens with Patrick Herbert and Solomone Kata. We have had Lachlan Burr starting at lock a lot of games, and there's a lot of conjecture around Adam Blair's influence on the Warriors, his low stats. Adam Blair's never been a big stats guy. Yes, some of these stats are kind of crazy, like a super minimal level of production. But when Adam Blair was with the Broncos, I remember just not really paying any attention to his stats because they were never anything interesting. It was just like there's nothing to report there, and it's easy because the Warriors aren't winning games right now, and Adam Blair is rolling out these crater statistics that are just like so, I don't even want to say terrible because that's got super negative connotations, but they're, in terms of like the size of their stats, they are terrible. The value, the amount, they are terrible. So it's easy to make Adam Blair the scapegoat right now and say that he is like a huge reason of the Warriors' woes. But it's, yeah, I think Adam Blair's value is going to be seen sooner rather than later, and it'll be interesting, like if the Warriors do start winning games, it will be interesting to see what Adam Blair's statistics are like, because sure, having one run, like it's very easy to improve on that, but you're never going to see Adam Blair have 8 runs for 100 meters. You're never going to see Adam Blair have 10 runs for 120 meters. Adam Blair tends to be the type of dude who's going to have 6 runs for 55 meters, couple of offloads, couple of tackle busts, and 25 tackles, and he's just there. Like, it's hard for people on the outside to have any comment on the value and influence of Adam Blair positively. I can't say to you that Adam Blair has this impact on the Warriors. I can't say to you that his professionalism or his work ethic. I don't know. But obviously he does stuff well because he's a NRL veteran. And so, interesting idea there is to, I'll not note it down in the back of my noggin, is to keep an eye on Adam Blair's stats as the Warriors do start to win games, which I think is a very realistic possibility. And, what are Adam Blair's statistics looking like when the Warriors are winning games? Because my hypothesis is that Adam Blair's statistics won't look drastically better. They'll look improved, but they won't be, huge values. It won't be like Adam Blair's statistics are... Adam Blair is vastly influential on the Warriors winning games. No, it's just like it's hard for anyone who isn't there around the team to have any sort of insight on the value of Adam Blair. I think his value is felt by the people around the organization, and it's not seen or quantifiable, if that's a word, by people on the outside. In terms of other, so then you've got Lachlan Burr. Lachlan Burr is interesting, and he has been given fairly consistent game time by Stephen Kearney. I just want to check out some Warrior statistics here. These numbers are coming from Fox Sports, so anyone who's interested in NRL stats, you've got Fox Sports, and then you've got NRL.com offering statistics. There is a bit of variety, so that's why I do make a point of differentiating where these statistics come from, because there is a little bit of variety between the two. So Lachlan Burr, as per Fox Sports, he's averaging 50 minutes a game in the middle of the park. Interesting for someone who's come to the Warriors from a reserve grade team of the Bulldogs. What Lachlan Burr offers the Warriors at the moment, I reckon, is mobility. He runs hard. He's got some hands. Not in terms of catching the ball, like he does love an error, old Lockie Burr. He does love an error, that's for sure. Let me just check how many errors Lachlan Burr is averaging, because he does drop the footy. We know that. We know he does drop the footy. 0.6, so not huge actually, not huge. Compared to Ken Mamalo, who's got an error at the moment, as does David Fusitu'a. They're averaging an error a game. But on Ken Mamalo, like, he's not dropping kicks, bruh. He's not dropping kicks. If you didn't learn, stop bombing at Ken Mamalo. He's solid. Lachlan Burr, what you notice about the Warriors is there's a lot of angle runs. So Lachlan Burr is very good when he's running angles. When he's not just running hard and fast, like that's more of a Bunty Afoa thing to do. Lachlan Burr is running angles. And then I like the variety there, because you've got a nimble, kind of quick-footed Leeson Armau. We know Ignatius Parsi loves his right foot step, so he's getting in between defenders. Lachlan Burr is more He's not running across field like Andrew Fafita, but he is running out on angles. He's mobile. He adds a bit of size. And in terms of the forward pack, like, the thing I'm really interested in is how the Warriors and Stephen Kearney balances out having Jazz Tavanga and Nathaniel Roach on the bench. A little bit smaller bench, which I like. I like having Nathaniel Roach on the bench as the extra hooker. He adds X factor, so he's very fast around the ruck, and for 20 minutes a game, that can split a defence open a couple of times. That then allows Jazz Tavanga to play as a lock forward, a middle forward, where he is at his best, probing around. You don't really lose any defensive intensity. If anything, you probably gain a bit. Very skillful, bobs around, creates a bit of second phase, and he's a creative, unique player for the Warriors. That leaves 2 bench spots. At the moment, you've kind of got Bunty Afoa on the bench holding down that role. And where's that extra bit of size coming from? You know, you do need a bit more size if you've got Tavanga and Roach on the bench. Sam Lasoni's not the one for me. He's not the one for me. He's been given plenty of opportunities by Coach Stephen Kearney, but it just doesn't feel like he is the right person for that bench. And so I would like to see a bit more size on the bench, especially like if you got Bunty Afoa and Isaiah Papali'i on the bench. Like there's not too much variety in terms of body size, in terms of body shape. So just an interesting thing to keep an eye on. And that's in keeping with the trend of not really knowing what the Warriors' best team is, because I think we are going to see a couple of tweaks to the forward pack and the bench, and figuring out who are the best people to execute Stephen Kearney's game plan as well. So yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling about the Warriors. Things are going against the Warriors from a footy gods perspective. That's making life very difficult in the super competitive NRL competition. That there is a negative vibe around the Warriors because they are losing games, but you got to understand the context and situation around the team, and I still think they have a high upside. I still think they can compete in the top 8, and they are currently on 4 points on 12, so this is where I'm going to flow into a broader NRL discussion. So if you don't like the NRL, but you do like the Warriors, you can stop listening now. The Warriors are on 4 points in 12th. They are joined by the Knights, Broncos, Titans, Panthers. So basically, the bottom 6 teams all have 4 points, which shows you how congested the NRL is and how quickly everything can change. So any one of those teams can lose a game, and suddenly you're looking at being, last place. But I do, from a Warriors perspective, I do think they have the upside to compete in the top 8 and climb, and just steadily grab a couple of 2 points, and sneak into the top 8. The Roosters and the Storm are the benchmark right now, and Siosua Tokiaho, Otara Scorpions Jr. is an absolute freakazoid. He is an absolute monster. Tokiaho is doing amazing things for the Roosters. I had a bunch of stats, so I'm going to try pull up those efficiency numbers here as well. Just in terms of what Siosua Tokiaho is doing in terms of running the footy. And when I'm talking about efficiency, I'm talking about how many meters you are getting per run, which is, obviously we know that those Australians, NRL folk, they're kind of a bit old school. They don't really give you that level of efficiency. And Tokiaho is one of the most efficient ball runners in the NRL. Like, he is a beast. He is a monster. And that's kind of crazy for someone who wasn't actually a middle forward when he was at the Warriors. He was like a centre. He was a centre, outside back, maybe edge forward, and someone who was versatile. So Tokiaho is 13th in run meters, but he's doing that as someone who is 37th in all runs. So there's a lot of players who take more runs than Tokiaho who have less meters. And in terms of what Tokiaho is rolling out efficiently, he is well over 10 meters per run. If you just hold on a second, he is doing 11.04 meters per run. So every time Tokiaho runs the footy, he is averaging 11 meters, which is absolutely bonkers. And if we go to, let me check here, David Clemmer, Clinton Gutherson is first in all run meters. Clemmer, middle forward, so fuck Gutherson, not like literally, like he's a good guy, everyone loves Clint Gutherson, but for, we're talking middle forwards here, David Clemmer, he is second in run meters. Let me just do a little bit of mathematics here and see what Clemmer's averaging, because that's going to put Tokiaho into context for you. So Clemmer is averaging 9.3 meters per run. That's what I'm talking about. Clemmer is second in meters, but he's averaging 9.3 meters per run, and Tokiaho is averaging 11 meters per run. So that's what Tokiaho is up to. Tokiaho is a beast in the middle of the park. And again, that just points back to Trent Robinson as a coach, because he is the bloke who turned Tokiaho into a middle forward. And he's got all that Roosters team firing. Roosters are doing damn well. Obviously, Jared Whitehair-Hargreaves has a nice impact on that as well. And you got guys like Zane Tedavano doing a good job. The Roosters, interestingly, have Poasa Fa'amasili, who's played a couple of games, and you also have Satili Tupunuia, who is Fa'amasili is a Glenora Bears junior in Auckland, and then Tupunuia is a Maris Saints junior from Auckland as well, and they are kind of, I think Trent Robinson at the Roosters has just given them minutes along with a couple of other kind of fringe forwards, just giving them game time, giving them a taste of footy here and there, and ensuring that they are engaged in the NRL team. When the Roosters beat the Storm, you had that field goal, and that started with the Tupunuia run through the middle of the park. He's usually like an edge forward, but he has been playing middle, as has Fa'amasili. So they are two Kiwi NRL players to keep an eye on with the Sydney Roosters. With the Melbourne Storm, what interests me hugely is the post-contact meters. So I've got those stats right here, and Tokiaho is 7th, which is great. Good for him. We know he's the man. But then the Storm have, they've got Jerome Hughes. He is 36th in post-contact meters. And, I think it's changed a bit from the last time I checked. But last week, before the Anzac round of footy, the Storm also had Kenny Bromwich and Brandon Smith in the top 50 for post-contact meters. So they've got Dale Finucane, they've got Felice Kafusi, they've got Jesse Bromwich, all in the top 50 of the post-contact meters, but we expect that. The thing about the Storm is Jerome Hughes is 36th in post-contact meters, and last week they also had Brandon Smith and Kenny Bromwich, all three who are on the smaller variety. Like Kenny Bromwich is undersized as an edge forward. Brandon Smith is a hooker, playing as a middle forward, and Jerome Hughes is a tiny little fullback, but they were all doing damn well in terms of post-contact meters. So that's a little insight into what makes the Storm so good, is they've got those dudes who are powerful and are obviously doing a good job in terms of getting those post-contact meters and charging downfield, and along with the bigger boppers who we expect to be getting plenty of post-contact meters. So the Storm and the Roosters are kind of the benchmark at the moment after 7 games. You got the Rabbitohs on 12 points as well. Rabbitohs are doing pretty well under Wayne Bennett. And it'll be interesting to see how they just feel at a level below the Storm and the Roosters, although they're on the same number of points. So it'll be interesting to see how the Rabbitohs go over the next few weeks and whether they can sustain this hot start, losing just one game. The bottom half of the top 8, you've got the Raiders in 4th, then you've got Eels, Sea Eagles, West Tigers and Dragons. That's where you're going to see things mix and match, because you're going to see other teams come into the top 8 at the expense of those few teams. I'm not saying that those teams are going to slide. I'm just saying that the fact that you've got the Raiders in 4th, that's kind of what the fuck. The fact that you've got the Sea Eagles coming out of nowhere and absolutely loving life under Des Hasler, it's a bit like, whoa, what are they up to? Like, all these teams are, best way of putting it is volatile. Like, who's to say that any of those teams are going to be there at the end of the season? They can go on a streak of losing a few games. They can go on a streak of winning a few games against really good teams, or against weaker teams, or against teams who are missing blokes. Like, the Broncos got a win against the Sharks, but that's probably because the Sharks are, we're missing a few players. So you got to keep those results in mind when you're thinking about which teams are good, because it comes in spits and spurts, and it comes in context, like which team is at full strength, and you can go on a 3-week cycle, 4-week cycle, month cycle, whatever it is. Things are going to change and progress. Raiders are very interesting. They're another team who's employing the mobile middle forward in Saliva Havili. So from a Kiwi NRL perspective, you've got Brandon Smith playing this role with the Melbourne Storm. You've got Saliva Havili playing this role for the Canberra Raiders. And you've got Jazz Tavanga doing this role for the New Zealand Aotearoa Warriors. So that's kind of cool. You've also got Shans Nickel Clockstad just coming out of nowhere and thriving at fullback for the Raiders. So he never really got an opportunity with the Warriors, went to the Raiders and went late in the summer, was a late arrival in Canberra, and now is just, he's taken that opportunity with open arms, and he has demanded consistent game time at fullback. Seagulls are also very interesting, and I watched that game yesterday with Manasi Fainu just having a blinder, and I do want to talk about Fainu because he's a very interesting player. He was a part of the Junior Kiwis. He has been part of the Totahere program that connects players in Australia with New Zealand Rugby League. So you have a couple of games and fixtures and squad stuff, which is also always a very interesting little thing to pay attention to. But I believe Manasi Fainu is going to play for Tonga. He was part of the Tongan squad last year, like unofficially. They just had him around. And Manasi Fainu is going to be someone who is going to be putting pressure on Sione Katoa and Saliva Havili for Tongan selection. Because Katoa, he is playing for a struggling Penrith Panthers team. And he's not playing all that well. So Manasi Fainu is someone to watch in terms of Tonga, because he is perfectly suited to how Tonga want to play footy. Neither Katoa or Havili is a dynamic, quick runner. Havili is very powerful. He's very crafty. He's got a kicking game. He's a good passer, and he's chunky. So that's how he's thriving in that middle forward role as a mobile, powerful middle forward for the Canberra Raiders. Let me just check here. Nah, don't worry. But Manasi Fainu is X Factor. We saw it with the Seagulls. I'm not sure who they beat yesterday. I think it was the Raiders. They defeated the Raiders, and Manasi Fainu had an absolute field day. Be interesting to check his stats from the game. So behind that Tongan forward pack, part of a team that's rolling downfield, Manasi Fainu will be an absolute nightmare to defend against. So he would be just darting out a dummy half. He played 57 minutes versus the Raiders. He had 13 runs for 139 meters. 6 dummy half runs for 67 metres. 3 offloads as well. That's Manase Whānau. And if you're thinking about Tonga, you're thinking they're powerful forwards. I'm also thinking about guys like Moeaki Fotuaika with the Gold Coast Titans. And Ofahiki Ogden is also someone to keep an eye on in terms of Tongan selection, because he is a Mangari's junior, former Warriors junior, now with the Bulldogs, playing through the middle, doing a very good job, getting plenty of game time for the Bulldogs, and he's someone who could come into the mix for the Bulldogs, for the Tongan team at some stage this year for one of their games, if any games. And it's a very interesting idea as the next tier of Tongan players coming through, building some depth. I do think Manase Whānau will get game time this year for Tonga, and then you have guys like Moeaki Fotuaika and Ofahiki Ogden, who are very interesting prospects for Tonga as well. I do have an idea about Samoa that I'm going to write about, so it's just funny. I just find the Samoa versus Tonga situation very interesting, and it's just the very opposite, and I do want to highlight that they are in very opposite positions, and I'm definitely going to write about that over the coming week or so. So it's kind of broad overlook, like West Tigers, Dragons, even the Seagulls, even the Eels. So there's nothing there. Even the Raiders, there's nothing there that makes you think they are definitely going to be in the top 8 come the end of the season. So just keep an eye on that at this stage. And in terms of teams that could come in right now, in the coming episodes, I'll be way more specific on what's happened over the weekend. I just want to kind of provide this broad overlook at the moment in the first kind of NRL specific Nichecast episode. I've talked about the Warriors. I think they've got a high upside potential to sneak into the top 8. Sharks, you've got Shaun Johnson's injury. You've got just whether they can compete at a high level with what they have. Broncos, no one's really buying any Broncos stock. The Knights are an interesting team, but they don't strike you as a team that's going to be a super duper threat to any of the better teams, and that's what I'm saying. Like, the Warriors can just grab a couple of wins, they could sneak into that mix of those teams, I would say. And then you've got Titans, Panthers, Cowboys, and Bulldogs. I'd say the Warriors and the Sharks are the most likely teams. Obviously, I've got a slight Warriors bias here because I'm all over the Warriors, but Warriors and Sharks are just two teams that feel like they could creep into the top 8 over the coming weeks at the expense of any, if that's keyword here, if any of those other teams do slip up. Otherwise, there won't be too much change there. So now we're just waiting for Teamless Tuesday, which is always interesting, far less interesting than it used to be because you get a whole lot of late changes, but that's next, and I'll probably hopefully record another discussion episode later in the week to preview some footy. You got Warriors hosting the Knights on the weekend as well. Rabbitohs versus Broncos, bit of a grudge match. Cowboys versus Titans, two of the more mediocre teams. I do like the Titans though. They're a funky team. Sharks versus Storm, that's like a game to see what the Sharks are up to, how competitive they can be this season, especially without Shaun Johnson. Raiders versus Panthers, Seagulls versus Bulldogs. Those are games with two top 8 teams against two struggling teams. So that's just kind of me setting the scene there. Roosters versus West Tigers could be a niggly little encounter for the Roosters, and then Eels versus Dragons. Rabbitohs versus Broncos is going to be hyped up because of the coaching situation. But Eels versus Dragons on that kind of bottom tier of the top 8 is going to be a very interesting game to see who is better poised for at this stage of the season after the first stanza, and who's just in a more confident position. But I will come back later in the week, I hope, to preview all these games with the team list and all that cool stuff as well. Hopefully you enjoyed it. As again, support the Niche Cache on Patreon. Support the Niche Cache however you want, however you can. And yeah, all that normal podcast stuff. Subscribe. Enjoy it. Love it. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Peace and love.